titled The Strength to Rise Again, a journey of transformation. Have you ever felt like life knocked you down so hard that you couldn't get up? Maybe it was a betrayal, a failure, or a loss that made you question your worth. But what if I told you that the very thing that tried to break you could become the source of your greatest strength? What if the pain you've endured could be the spark that ignites a powerful transformation? This is the story of how we can rise again, no matter how deep the scars, and turn adversity into triumph. It was the darkest night of Emily's life. The weight of her world had come crashing down, and she couldn't see a way out. The promises she had made to herself, the dreams she had so carefully nurtured, all seemed shattered. She sat alone in her room, the walls closing in, and for a moment she wondered if it would all ever get better. But then, in that moment of despair, something unexpected happened. A flicker of hope, small but undeniable, stirred within her. It wasn't much, just a faint whisper that told her to stand up, to move, to keep going. It was the quiet voice of her own strength, a strength she hadn't known she possessed until now. Emily realized that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something greater than she had ever imagined. The days that followed weren't easy. Every step forward felt like wading through thick mud, each challenge harder than the last. But Emily wasn't about to give up. She began to focus on what she could control, her mindset. Each morning, she would look into the mirror, not as the broken woman who had lost everything, but as the woman she was becoming. She repeated words of strength and affirmation, even when she didn't believe them. Slowly, those words began to sink in, becoming more than just empty phrases. They became her reality. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a series of small victories that, when added up, started to change her life. Every setback, every failure was no longer something to fear. It became a lesson, a stepping stone to something better. Emily understood now that true strength wasn't about avoiding challenges, but about how you face them. And each day, she faced them with more courage than the last. As weeks turned into months, Emily found herself becoming stronger, more resilient. The path was still tough, and there were moments when the old doubts crept back in, whispering that she wasn't enough, that she would never make it. But Emily had learned to silence those voices. They no longer had control over her. One day, she found herself walking into a room full of people who had once doubted her, people who had whispered behind her back, thinking she would never recover. As she stood there, she could feel their eyes on her, surprised, maybe even impressed. The same woman they had written off was now standing tall, unapologetic and fierce. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but because she had finally realized her worth. The woman she was before, fragile, uncertain, afraid of failing, was gone. The woman before them now was a force to be reckoned with. Emily smiled inwardly. This was her moment. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. It wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. And with each passing day, she continued to move forward, no longer defined by the pain of her past, but by the power of her future. The first time Emily stood on the edge of her dream, she was terrified. The vision she had in her mind was clearer than ever, but the road ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles she couldn't yet see. She thought of all the times she had faltered before, the times when fear had held her back from chasing what she truly wanted. But this time, there was a difference. This time, she understood that fear wasn't a signal to retreat, it was a signal to move forward. Fear, she realized, was a companion, not an enemy. It could either cripple her or push her to heights she never thought possible. With each decision, each action, Emily grew stronger. She had learned that success wasn't just about achieving an end goal. It was about the person you became in the process. And she was becoming someone who didn't give up, who didn't let setbacks define her, but instead let them fuel her. The road was still long, and the journey wasn't over, but for the first time in her life, Emily understood that she was capable of facing anything that came her way. Because the real victory wasn't in the destination. It was in the strength she had found within herself along the way. One evening, as Emily stood outside her apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she realized how far she had come. It wasn't just the external success that mattered, though she had achieved so much already. It was the inner peace she had finally found. The constant battle with her doubts had become less intense, and in its place was a quiet confidence, grounded in the knowledge that she could weather any storm. She thought about the times when she had wanted to quit, when it felt easier to retreat into the familiar comfort of her fears. But each time she pushed through, reminding herself that growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens when you push yourself beyond what you think is possible. Emily had discovered the magic that happens when you stop fearing failure and start embracing the lessons it brings. In the stillness of that moment, Emily made a vow to herself. She would never stop growing, never stop challenging herself. No matter where life took her, she would remain relentless in her pursuit of becoming the best version of herself. She had learned that true success wasn't about the destination. It was about the strength to rise again, no matter how many times life tried to knock you down. The next day, Emily woke up to a world that felt different. Not in a magical way, but in a way that reminded her of how much she had changed. Her journey was not defined by instant success or grand moments. It was the accumulation of tiny victories, each one building upon the last, shaping her into someone who no longer feared the future. She had come to realize that the most important battle was not against external forces, but against the internal voice that told her she wasn't good enough. That voice had been loud for so many years, drowning out her self-belief. But now it was quieter. Emily had learned to drown it out with her own voice, the voice that told her she was worthy, capable, and strong. As she sat at her desk, reviewing the plans she had once thought impossible to achieve, Emily couldn't help but smile. The road had been long, but the lessons she had learned were invaluable. She no longer sought validation from others, for she had finally validated herself. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her actions and achievements spoke for themselves. The most incredible part of her journey was that she had rediscovered a part of herself that she had long forgotten, her passion. The passion that had once been buried beneath doubt and fear had now resurfaced, brighter than ever. It wasn't about following the expectations of others anymore. It was about pursuing what truly set her soul on fire, and she was ready to do that every single day. Emily's heart raced as she walked into the room, her hands slightly trembling. It was a familiar space, filled with reminders of the past, the obstacles, and the people who had once doubted her. But today, it felt different. Today, she wasn't the same person who had once walked into this room, overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. Today, she was someone who had reclaimed her power. She took a deep breath, absorbing the energy of the room, letting it remind her of how far she had come. Each piece of furniture, each object in the room, told a story of her growth. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a warrior, and she had fought hard for the life she had now. As she looked around, memories flooded back. The pain, the moments of doubt, the battles she had fought alone. But with each memory, Emily also remembered how she had overcome them. Each setback had been a lesson, each failure had been a teacher. And now, as she stood in this space, she understood the true meaning of resilience. For so long, she had believed that success was something to be chased, something to be earned. But now, she understood that success wasn't just about the destination. It was about who you became along the way. The person she was today had been forged in the fires of adversity, and there was nothing that could break her now. The world outside had always been full of challenges, but Emily no longer saw them as obstacles. Instead, she saw them as opportunities to grow, to rise higher, and to prove to herself that she was more than capable of handling whatever came her way. Emily had learned that life was not about waiting for the perfect moment. It was about making the most of every moment. The beauty of the journey was not in what you had, but in how you used what you had. She understood now that success wasn't something handed to you. It was something you created by staying committed, no matter how difficult the road. The days weren't always easy. There were moments when Emily felt like giving up. She still faced setbacks, some large, some small, but she no longer saw them as failures. Instead, she saw them as reminders that success was not about perfection. It was about persistence. It was about showing up every day, even when the road seemed long and uncertain. What made Emily's journey remarkable wasn't that she didn't face challenges. It was that she kept moving forward, one step at a time. No matter how many times she stumbled, she didn't need to have it all figured out. She just needed to keep trying. And that was enough. Emily's growth wasn't just in what she achieved. It was in how she saw the world. She stopped waiting for the universe to align perfectly with her goals and started working with what she had. It was no longer about chasing dreams that felt distant. It was about taking bold action toward the dreams she had right in front of her. Every step she took was a choice to keep moving, to keep pushing through. And with each choice, she gained more confidence, more clarity, and more understanding of who she truly was. Her journey wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming more of herself. She had learned that real strength didn't come from external validation. It came from within. It came from the belief that no matter the circumstances, she had the power to create her own path. And this realization gave her the courage to make decisions that aligned with her purpose, not anyone else's expectations. One evening, as Emily sat quietly by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she thought about how much had changed in her life. Her journey had been long and at times exhausting, but every moment had shaped her into someone who could face anything with courage. The hardest part of her transformation had been letting go of the fear of failure. Emily had spent so much time worrying about what could go wrong that she had forgotten to focus on what could go right. The more she let go of the fear of failing, the more space she made for success. The more she trusted herself, the more her world opened up. And so, Emily had begun to embrace uncertainty. She no longer needed to have all the answers. She simply needed to take the next step, trusting that with each choice, the path would unfold before her. Success was no longer an elusive concept for Emily. It wasn't about the end result. It was about the journey she had embraced with all its ups and downs. Emily had become a master at finding value in the process. She had stopped defining herself by her achievements and started defining herself by her willingness to keep going, no matter the obstacles. The true measure of success, she realized, was not in how many goals you met, but in how many times you refused to give up when everything seemed to be falling apart. It was about the strength to rise again, over and over, and to continue pursuing what mattered most. By now, Emily had transformed her approach to life completely. The fear of failure no longer held power over her, and the whispers of self-doubt had grown quieter. Each decision she made was driven by purpose, not fear. She no longer let the opinions of others sway her. She trusted her own voice more than ever before. Her life was no longer dictated by the events of her past. She had made peace with her history, understanding that it was part of what made her who she was today. Emily had learned to embrace every part of herself, the flaws, the scars, and the strength that came from having faced it all. She knew that the road ahead would never be easy. Life would always throw challenges her way, but now she welcomed them, because she knew that with every challenge came an opportunity to grow. And every time she overcame one, she became even stronger. As Emily walked down the street one afternoon, she realized that she no longer carried the weight of her past with her. The burden of regret, guilt, and fear that had once weighed her down had been replaced by a newfound freedom. For the first time in her life, Emily was truly free. Free from the expectations of others, free from the chains of self-doubt, and most importantly, free from the limitations she had once placed on herself. She walked with purpose now, each step infused with the confidence that came from having faced her darkest moments and emerged stronger. Emily was no longer afraid of what the future held because she knew that she could handle whatever came her way. The future, she realized, was hers to create. One of the most empowering lessons Emily had learned was that success wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about being brave enough to start, knowing that mistakes would happen along the way, but they didn't define her. The real failure was never trying. Emily had realized that perfection was an illusion, and it was okay to stumble as long as she kept going. Every setback was a lesson, and every failure brought her closer to the success she had worked so hard for. The key was to keep moving, no matter how slow the progress seemed. The journey wasn't about rushing, it was about finding joy in the process of becoming. And Emily had learned to embrace that journey fully. As the months passed, Emily's life continued to evolve. Her growth wasn't just internal, it was reflected in the changes in her career, relationships, and mindset. She had learned to take control of her own narrative, to write her own story, rather than letting the past dictate her future. She understood now that success was not an end goal, but a lifelong process. It wasn't about achieving perfection, it was about striving for progress. Emily no longer feared the unknown because she knew that she was capable of facing anything that came her way. With each day that passed, Emily continued to move forward, ever growing, ever evolving, and ever striving to become the best version of herself. She had learned that the true power lay in the willingness to rise again. Every time life knocked her down, Emily had come to understand that the pursuit of happiness was not a destination. It was a way of living. It was found in the small moments, in the choices she made each day to stay positive, to remain grateful, and to continue growing. Happiness wasn't something that could be bought or achieved overnight. It was a mindset that Emily had worked hard to cultivate. She took pleasure in the little victories now. Each morning, she would wake up and take a deep breath, grateful for another day to make a difference in her life. Whether it was completing a task at work, spending time with loved ones, or simply taking time for herself, Emily found joy in all of it. She realized that happiness was not the absence of struggles, but the ability to find peace even amidst them. And with that realization came an unshakable sense of contentment, one that she carried with her every day. As Emily's confidence grew, she found herself inspiring others. People around her started to notice the changes in her, how she held herself, how she spoke, how she approached life. And soon they began to ask her how she had done it. Her answer was always the same: I just kept going. Emily realized that her journey was not just her own. It was part of a larger story, one that could help others find their own strength. She had become a living example of the power of perseverance, and through her example, she encouraged others to embrace their own struggles and rise above them. She wasn't just healing herself anymore. She was helping others heal too. And that gave her a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. The more Emily gave, the more she received. She had learned that true success wasn't about accumulating wealth or accolades. It was about the impact you had on others. Emily now found joy in helping those around her rise, in being a source of support and encouragement. Her life had shifted from one focused on personal achievement to one centered on collective growth. She no longer sought validation in her own accomplishments. Instead, she found fulfillment in the success of others. As she watched the people around her thrive, Emily realized that this was what life was truly about: helping one another grow, supporting one another through challenges, and celebrating each other's victories. Emily had learned to embrace the concept of balance in her life. For so long, she had been consumed by work, by the pressure to succeed. But now, she understood the importance of balance, of taking time for herself, for her relationships, and for her passions. She had worked hard to create a life that wasn't just about achieving goals, but about enjoying the process of getting there. She had learned that rest was as important as hard work, and that taking care of her mind and body was essential to long-term success. With this newfound balance, Emily felt more at peace than ever. She had found a rhythm in her life that allowed her to pursue her dreams without sacrificing her well-being. As Emily continued her journey, she realized that there was no end to growth. Life was a continual process of learning, evolving, and becoming. And while she had come so far, she knew that there was still so much more to experience and achieve. She embraced the uncertainty of the future with open arms, knowing that every experience, every challenge, and every opportunity would help her grow even further. Emily no longer saw herself as a finished product, but as a work in progress, constantly evolving into the best version of herself. And with each new chapter, she knew that the best was yet to come. Emily's story wasn't just a story of personal triumph. It was a story of resilience, of learning to face the storms in life head on and come out stronger on the other side. She had learned to embrace both the highs and the lows, understanding that both were essential to her growth. She had come to understand that resilience wasn't about avoiding difficulties. It was about developing the strength to face them and keep going, no matter how hard they seemed. And with each challenge she faced, she grew stronger, more confident, and more determined. With each passing day, Emily's belief in herself grew deeper. She had conquered so much, and yet she knew that there was always room for more growth. She wasn't afraid of change anymore. She welcomed it. Change had become her ally, and she knew that the more she embraced it, the more opportunities she would have to evolve. She had learned to trust the process, to trust herself, and to trust that everything she had experienced had prepared her for whatever came next. The future no longer seemed daunting. It seemed like an exciting adventure, one she was ready to take on with confidence and enthusiasm. Emily had learned that life was full of uncertainties, but that was exactly what made it beautiful. She no longer feared the unknown, she welcomed it. She knew that the best things in life often came when you least expected them, and that the most important thing was to stay open to the possibilities. She had learned to embrace uncertainty as an essential part of the journey. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being willing to take the next step, even if you didn't know exactly where it would lead. Now, Emily was a woman of strength and wisdom, but her journey was far from over. She continued to chase her dreams, knowing that the road would always be filled with challenges, but she no longer feared them. She faced them with grace and determination, knowing that every challenge was an opportunity for growth. Her story was one of constant evolution, one where every chapter brought new lessons, new triumphs, and new chances to become better. Emily had discovered that the beauty of life was not in the destination, but in the continuous journey of becoming. And so, Emily's story continues. She's not done yet. She's just getting started. And as you watch her journey unfold, remember this: your story is still being written. Your challenges are just the beginning of your transformation. Keep pushing forward, keep believing in yourself, and keep rising every time life knocks you down. If you found inspiration in Emily's story, like this video and subscribe for more motivational content that will help you keep going no matter what. Remember, the strength to rise again is within you. Keep moving forward and watch your life transform.